welcome to Ultra Running Magazine. I've got Ultrarunner Tim Viner with me today to talk about the Dragon's Back. Welcome and thank you for talking to us.
Hi, morning, Alex. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, so first off, we've got to do is talk a little bit about your background. Obviously, you can't be a mere mortal to be completing the Dragon's Back. So tell me a little bit about your running background.
So the truth is, I've always been a runner. I ran at school. I always planned to I just did it because I enjoyed it. I never won any races. I was never going to be the next world champion of anything at all. But I always just loved to run. It was my release, if you like, even as a child. I had quite a nasty motorbike crash when I was 17, which kind of put a stop to it for about 5 or 6 years, realistically, year 2000. And that meant that I couldn't run for a good 5 or 6 years, not properly anyway. And I started running again late 2006, 2007, and kind of grew from there. I ran with Shrewsbury Athletics Club back then. Did the usual kind of 10Ks, couple of half marathons, 5K stuff. And then a friend of mine, Vicky Grimmer, asked me to do an event in Snowdonia, which was 22 miles, 8,500 feet of climbing. I'd never done anything really in the hills at all before that. So decided, yeah, why not? Let's have a crack at it. And it took 6 hours, something like that. It was pretty brutal. And that kind of sparked my real desire to just go and see how far I could push myself. I remember finishing that race and just being filled with this euphoric feeling and thinking, oh my God, I've just done that. What else am I capable of? So then that kind of grew from there, and I just did a bit more and a bit more. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed with an illness, an autoimmune illness in 2015, which kind of put a stop to me running again for a couple of years. So I kind of had at least 2 years, if not 3 years off again, where I didn't run almost at all, to be honest. And then a good friend locally asked me again to do a run called the Fellsman up in Yorkshire. So I ran that. That was the first big race I came back to. And that was 2019. And I remember running the Fellsman quite well, because it got to about mile 23 and we were running with a guy from Spain, and he was dead chatty, and we were running along chatting away, and Steve, who I was with, we were just really enjoying the joy of the run. And my watch pinged to say we were at mile 24, and I said, well, that's the furthest I've ever run. And it was like, this guy just couldn't believe it. And then obviously that's 100k, the Fellsman, so it was a bit of a shock to the system. I then did the Longwind Hike, my local ultra, the end of 2019. That's always October time. And that was it. I was well and truly hooked on ultras. And 2020, obviously, everything all kind of fell to pieces, didn't it, with COVID and whatnot. No, 2017, sorry, was the Fellsman. 2017 was the Fellsman and the Longwind Hike. And then I redid the Longwind Hike in 2019 and did quite a good job of that one. Then we had 2020 off. And once we were during lockdown, the illness that I was diagnosed with in 2015 meant that I had to stay at home. I had to shield. So I wasn't able to train as much as I'd like to for the whole of kind of March and April. And then June, once they opened the doors to say that I could go outside again, I ran every day in June, and I did 500 kilometers in June for charity, raised quite a bit of money, and that made me realize that I could run day after day after day. So then I went searching for something that would really test me, and stumbled across the Dragon's Back.
I mean, when you listen to your history, you've gone from obviously doing your usual 5K, 10K, which most people do. You've then got into a taste of trails, and I always say, once you touch trails and into the mountains, you never want to go back on the road ever again. And then there is quite a bit of a jump there, I think, from doing what you used to do from the Fellrunner to always, straight into the Dragon's Back. I think it's quite a big jump. And how you top that in the future, I don't know. And I know we'll talk a little bit later on, but on your social media, you said you don't think you'll do anything as extreme as the Dragon's Back again, but I've heard that before. So obviously, but the good thing about that is that those who don't know what the Longmid Hike is, it's basically a scout 50-mile walk around Church Stretton, isn't it? And it covers a lot of the peaks, and it's meant to be more of a walk than there is a run. But I know there is runners that come along onto it. Do you think from your first attempt and your second attempt that you made massive improvements? Because I'm guessing the first one was your first. Was it your first 50 mile you did enough? Yeah, or second, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd done the Felsman earlier in that year. Sorry, there's a bit of a glitch. I'd done the Felsman earlier that year, 2017. So I had run that distance before, but it was a bit of a different setup. And being local to the area, I thought I'd have a reasonable chance of having a crack at it. But I totally underestimated it, to be perfectly honest. Having done the Felsman, when you looked at the distance and the elevation, I kind of looked at the Longmid Hike and thought, oh yeah, that'll be a breeze in respect of the Felsman, but it really wasn't. It's got a real bite to it. There's no two ways about it. It's, but I think I did. I was just coming up on 12 and a half hours the first year I did it. And then I had a year off in 2018. I didn't do any real big runs at all. I kind of needed to give my body a rest because I'd, as you say, gone from kind of 10Ks and half marathons straight into these huge big runs. And my body got a bit of a shock from that. But then 2019 went back and I trained really hard for probably a year, really, just focused on going and doing well at the Longmid Hike. And my aim was to do under 10 hours, which I was well and truly on for. Everything was going really well. And then you'll know, but some people might not, in the Longmid Hike, because it's run by the Scouts, there's certain rules they stick to. And once nightfall comes, once it gets dark, you have to team up as a group. And it's kind of potluck as to who you team up with, depending on where everyone is in the race. And I got to the aid station just as 4 lads were leaving. So they left. I then went into the aid station and was sat there for 40 minutes waiting for the next group of people to come through. Basically, I got through the one aid station just in time to miss the cut-off to wait for people, which meant the next person in had to then wait for them. So then they came into my aid station already as a group of 4. And unfortunately, a couple of the lads on that just weren't quite ready for that next pace step that I kind of wanted to do sub 10. And the weather that year was horrendous. Once we got back, you go back up onto the Longmid, up onto Pole Bank, and it was like pea soup. You couldn't see a thing. So we lost quite a bit of time in that respect. So it ended up, I was over 10 hours, not by a massive amount, but I finished 8th. So I was pretty happy.
Like you said, I know the Longmid hiking, especially, it is a walking an event, but yeah, it can be quite difficult at night when you have to hang around. You get cold and you get going again. Yeah. It slows things down a little bit. What about let's talk about your training for the Longmid Hike, and then we'll look at your training for the Dragon's Back and see how they compare. So what sort of training did you do for the Longmid Hike?
So initially it was just kind of getting lots of big base miles in a week, trying to get that level, my fitness, my cardiovascular fitness up to being able to cope with going and going and going. I did do a few back-to-back days, but not many. I do kind of some fast work in the week, and then unfortunately I work shifts, so kind of a week and a weekend doesn't exist for me, but I'll call it a week and a weekend just to make it simple. And then my weekend I'd go and have a longish run if I could. And specifically, I almost always went to Church Stretton because it's local to me, it makes sense, and incorporated in a lot of recce's. So it was the maximum I did in training for the Longmid Hike was a 50-mile week. I never went more than that. And I think that 50-mile week was probably a couple of really short runs and then one big one.
Yeah, I think that's why I class it when I do my coaching is probably the basic what you need for a 50-mile ultra. It's pretty standard now. So when you moved into the Dragon's Back, then what sort of training did you change? Did you go more into the mountains? Did you up that elevation a bit more? Did you go longer, more back-to-backs?
Yeah, so initially I was very aware that it was going to be proper mountains, whereas, you know, as much as the hills in Stretton are great, they're not mountains. You can't get the same elevation. So I did I knew that I needed to get into the mountains more than I previously had, but also I wanted to make sure I'd got that really good base fitness first. So I decided to do it in June 2020. So the first few months really was a lot of just long weeks, getting the fitness up. I did my first unsupported 100k round Church Stretton in the November last year. Just went out, just did it by myself, and I did the Escape from Meridian. You know, the one where they did the out and back. I did that with a local chap called Dave Saunders, who I'm friends with, and we ran along the canal towpath to Nantwich and then back again. So it was just initially trying to get big mileage in. And then once I was quite confident that I've got quite a good base fitness, I then started to go to the mountains as much as I possibly could. And I'm fortunate that I've got a van that I can sleep in. So I'd go down, I'd do a day in the hills, I'd sleep, and then I'd do another one. And gradually more and more, I was doing more and more back-to-backs. And then it got to the point sort of June time where I was doing back, and they were all like, one of them would be a 30-mile day, another one might be a 25-mile day. It was trying to get as much distance and elevation in my legs on a number of days just to get my body used to it.
So basically just get used to the old multi-day sort of scenario in the mountains and going on there. So we're talking like so just doing it back-to-back, it's 3 days of back-to-back or longer than that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's probably the most important part of your training that you recommend somebody else to do? Is that the crucial bit?
I think so, yeah. I'd never done a multi-day before, so it was a real like proper jump into the fire doing the Dragon's Back, and I didn't really know what to expect. But I've always worked on the theory, if I can run it in a week, I can run it in one day. But the Dragon's Back kind of takes that away from you completely because you're running for 6 days in a row. So all I thought was I've just got to get my body used to running a horrendous day of running and then getting up the next day and still being able to run another horrendous day of running. So yeah, I think it's really crucial. The two big things in my view are your ability to move quickly over the mountains. You're not going to run it all because you just can't unless you're some kind of freak. That's the truth. And that ability to get up the next day, even though you're really hurting, you know, and if you don't want to do that too often in training because obviously it's bad for you, but you need to be able to still move even on the days where your body says it doesn't want to. It's surprising how quickly your body warms back up into getting moving again.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, you know, you were talking about the multi days. I think that's really important. And obviously getting yourself used to that sort of technical terrain as well. I think you can't get that unless you go into the mountain ranges and get used to how slow that makes you go, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I did a couple of big training days with a friend from work. We went and parked down at Lake Ogwyn, and then we did like Trifan across to the Gliders, up and over Crib Goch, around the Horseshoe, and then back. And you kind of look at it on a map and you go, well, yeah, it's something like 17 miles. Let's say, I don't know, let's give ourselves 5 hours. But then you end up taking more like 7.5, 8, because you just can't move that quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it slows down massively. So you obviously did a bit of practice runs on the course, on the route, and I know a lot of people that I've spoken to are thinking about doing the Dragon's Back might be a bit fearful of heights, maybe a bit fearful of stuff. Do you recommend that they give it a go in training, or do you reckon sometimes just go a bit blind and get it done once and never do it again, like especially like Crib Goch, for example?
So the only day I recce'd was day one, which is crazy when I live, realistically, I don't live that far away, especially to the sort of midpoints, Dolgeffley and whatnot. It's pretty easy for me to get to. But I was by the time you'd figured out, because I work full time and I've got a family, it's hard to fit everything in, isn't it? I'd never done Crib Goch before I started training, and I thought I kind of had a few discussions with a few different people and decided to go and give it a go in training. Because my thought was, if I go there and I'm training and I get on top of it and I absolutely, you know, bottle it and end up sat down, you know, it's not a disaster because it's a training run and I can go back and I can try again and I can get used to it. Actually, I'm honestly not a big fan of heights, but I find that it's just so awe-inspiring when you get up there that actually you kind of forget the fact that there's a huge, great big drop down to your right. And don't look at videos on YouTube is my biggest advice to someone who's not done it, because it just doesn't, it's not like that. It's totally different. And there are sections of it where you will feel uncomfortable, but it's amazing. And if you've signed up for that race, it's that, I think, for me was probably the highlight. It's just, and we were in some ways really lucky. The weather was absolutely amazing on day one, so we got up there and you could see for miles, and it was really incredible, but at the same time exhausting. But you don't really have time to take it in. So that I would definitely say go and try stuff. If there's something on the course that you think, oh, I'm not so sure about that, definitely go and give it a go. I personally think, my personal view is, I think Trifan is more scary than Crib Goch.
Okay.
But then, because it's just massive big boulders, and if you get a step wrong, it could be really quite disastrous. Whereas Crib Goch, there's loads of foot points you can put, and I don't think it's too bad. But that's just me personally.
Yeah, I think everyone's got their own sort of fears, and I agree with you. I think you've got to practice it. You've got to get yourself the feeling of it. But like you said, when you're in a race format, I think that's sort of just, you forget about that a little bit. And if you're going to pick one of the toughest mountain races in the world, I think you want that experience. Yeah. You want that top of the mountain. There's no point going down the bottom bits, because that doesn't make it hard then, does it? Let's talk a little bit about obviously the experience on the race. So I know that this might go on a bit for you in the sense of, because it's 6 days worth of storytelling, but tell us a little bit about how your race went from day one all the way through, what problems you had, and how you felt after each day.
Okay, so I'm sure that if people are watching this, they're probably aware of the race itself, and probably know what happened in 2021 in terms of weather and everything else. So it was the first year that they did 6 days as opposed to 5. First year that it ran from Conway Castle all the way to Cardiff Castle. So even Shane Oley, who organises the event, didn't really have much of an idea of how it was going to go. I'd done lots of research in terms of what previous competitors experienced and all the rest of it. Went to Conway Castle, very, very nervous, very apprehensive, but also incredibly excited at the same time. Really wanted to get it done. My aim was to go there and to finish. I wasn't bothered at all about where I came in terms of rankings or anything like that. My desire was to finish the entire race. You go into Conway Castle bright and early on the Monday morning. Well, they obviously have your registration on Sunday, but that's just much like any other race entry registration, so we can gloss over that. Monday morning, you go into the castle at Conway, and there's just this real, like a live feeling. Everyone's kind of buzzing for what's coming. People are nervous. I was nervous. But there's just the overwhelming feeling within the castle walls was just excitement, and a buzz to get going. So I was in there with that friend who I did the Escape from Meridian with, Dave Saunders. He entered the race too, and we were chit-chatting. You kind of trying to get to know people a little bit, but everybody's just so nervous and edgy at that point. There's not much conversation with people that you don't know. Shane did a little bit of a talk, and then just literally 3, 2, 1, off we go. And you go out the castle walls, which does take quite a while. You're not timed from the start as in where he says 3, 2, 1. You're timed from when you get out of the castle. That's where the first dibber is. You use these little things they attach to your wrist to dib in and out. So the first dibber is actually outside at the bottom of the castle walls, and then you're on to a little bit of tarmac before you hit the hills. But obviously it starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you've only got till 10 o'clock at night to get the day done.
Yeah. Which
sounds like a massive amount of time, but if you've watched any of the videos, it's actually, some people, it wasn't enough time. So it's a bit of a balance. If you're going to be really slow, you don't want to be at the front and slow everybody else down. But if you're in the castle walls, everyone's kind of going at a set speed anyway. So if you've got any concerns about not getting day one done, I would say don't hang around in the castle any longer than you have to. Yeah, you really got to get a move on. I mean, I think there's footage of one guy who literally finished day one at 22 minutes, about 2 minutes past 10 at night, and you just think, you know, that was easily made upable within the castle walls. If he was right at the back of the pack, it is, you know, you've got like 400 people trying to walk down single track, so it's not simple. But then you get out of the castle walls, you're onto a little bit of tarmac through the town, and then you're straight up onto the beginnings of the Carneddus, which is quite kind of sheep trackish to start with, quite pleasant running. I was running with Dave Saunders at that point, and unfortunately for Dave, within the first kind of 5 miles, less than, we were running along this bit of sheep track, and the ground literally fell away underneath his foot, and he went tumbling down this hill. Managed to get him back up, and he said it dusted himself off and said he was okay, but a bit sore. But it transpires that he did something to his ankle at that point, unfortunately. But he told me to carry on. I carried on, and you kind of run up over the Carneddus, and it's this massive long snake at this point because it's all single file. Yeah, the front runners are off and away, but the fact is that everybody else is just this huge, great big long snake running up the beginnings of the mountains.
I'm guessing sort of stuck in a line really. There isn't much to overtake you. That's you moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's quite narrow at that point. There's not much open space. It's only for the first few miles really, and then once you get up onto the more mountainous stuff, you're more free to kind of spread around a bit and make some progress. It was overcast in the morning, but it was still, even though it was overcast, it was quite warm. And only in hindsight now do I realise that actually it was really quite warm, and people were really suffering with dehydration even early on.
So yeah, I remember back, I think the week before it was a little bit cooler, a lot of rain, and then all of a sudden this heat wave came out of nowhere. And I think it was just for the week really, and I think it cooled back down again that following weekend.
Yeah, I think day one peaked at like 30 degrees, and 30 degrees in the mountains is hot, isn't it? Yeah. So you kind of run up over the top, and you do a couple of the big Carneddus, and then you drop down into Lake Ogwyn, run along the main A5 to the car park, which is your first major checkpoint, where you can get your on that day. The first checkpoint is your drop bag checkpoint. So you get 2 checkpoints each day, a drop bag checkpoint and a water checkpoint, and they swap whether it's first or second around each day, depending on the distances in the terrain, I guess. So day one into Lake Ogwyn car park is the drop bag checkpoint. At that point for me was just like get a load of fluids in me as much as I possibly could, and get some food in me, and then just get out and get moving again as soon as possible. And then you're up straight out of there, straight up Tryfan, which is brutal. And you know, it was almost like a scene out of a film, because I remember climbing up the initial kind of steps. You kind of curl up to the left, and then it opens up a bit, and then you turn left and you just walk up the chute straight up Tryfan. And I remember looking up and just seeing people like sat on the left, sat on the right, people lying on rocks, and every single person you come up to, you go, "Are you okay?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, I just need a minute." And I think basically some people perhaps hadn't got their body used to eating when running, and that is huge. Make sure you get used to being able to eat and still move fast, and get your body used to having a high heart rate, even though it's still trying to deal with food, because I think that caught a lot of people out. And making sure you drink plenty. I think a lot of people were suffering with dehydration there.
I think that's fair to say for a lot of races. I think nutrition is one of those things that hasn't really been worked out for individuals.
Yeah,
they're doing the long ones, not really testing it. But the thing for the Dragon's Back, I suppose your hands are busy during this event as well. You've got your poles or you're climbing.
Yeah.
So once your hands have been taken out of the scenario, you forget about food again.
Yeah. Yeah, and people talk about magic numbers like 180 calories, 200 calories an hour, and all this kind of jazz. The truth is, everybody is different. So I don't personally work on calories. Maybe I should, but I just know I just need to keep eating and I use a lot of mountain fuel stuff. So the liquid energy, which I find, because you do get to the point where you just can't eat the same stuff anymore. Whereas liquid, you can normally keep taking it on, can't you? So then, you go up onto the top of Tryfan, up to Adam and Eve, where you dib there, and then it's like scramble down up onto the Glidders. And again, going up the Glidders, there was just people everywhere, just stopped, sat on rocks, and just like absolutely drained. And I experienced something I'd never ever experienced in a race before. As I'm climbing up onto the Glidders, I started getting cramp, which I have never ever had before. And honest to God, I can see why people make such a fuss about it, because it is horrendous. And you kind of have a bit of a stretch, have a bit of a drink, it'll pass. And then, you take a big step and it just comes back in an instant again. And that was horrendous. And that unfortunately stayed with me till the end of the race. And through the night of the first night, just kept like with these horrendous cramps down my right hamstring. It was just awful. But I'd said to myself before the race, no matter what, unless you break something, no matter how you feel when you're in between checkpoints, just keep moving. Even if it's just really slowly, as long as you're moving, you're going in the right direction. If you stop, you're just eating time. So even if I was trying to stretch, it was kind of doing it on the move and just kept on making forward progress. You go up over the top of the Glidders, which is always quite exciting. If people haven't been up there, that I would definitely recommend just going up there and having a sight of it, because it's like nowhere on earth. It's just bizarre, isn't it? You could be on a completely different planet. To just get an awareness of what the ground is like up there, and know because I'm sure if it was misty, if it was foggy, it would be an absolute nightmare. Well, I know it is, because I've done a couple of races where I've been up there and it's foggy, and it's just like you don't know what on earth you're looking at. So it's definitely worth getting up there for people, in my view. And then you drop down off Glidders down towards Penny Pass, which is quite a nice runnable descent normally. And you come down to Penny Pass to the youth hostel, where that was checkpoint 2 on day 1, so you're able to top up your water, just get a load of fluids inboard, and the youth hostel itself was open, so I went in and got myself an ice cream, and a can of, ridiculously bought myself a can of Lilt Zero, which was an absolute waste of time, because of course it's got no sugar in it, but my brain just said that'll do, it looks tasty. But it was still nice and refreshing, I suppose, but I could have done with the sugar in reality. Stupid.
Hey, doing the events, that's fine.
Yeah. But I got to that point, and my mum had taken me because my wife was working, and my eldest son had come along on the day 1 to see how it all went. And they said that I just literally looked like a walking zombie. I was a complete mess. And I think the reality is that everybody who, no matter whether you finished day 1 or you just got to checkpoint 1, at some point during that day you became a walking zombie, because it was just so brutally hot that it just took everything out of you. But the spirit of the race just kind of kept you going, and it was just clear. We went into the youth hostel and bought those few bits and pieces, and the girl in front of me, she went to pay with her Apple Pay, and their Apple Pay machine wouldn't accept a card. So then she just stood there, and I was like, oh, don't worry, I'll pay. So I paid for hers, and then someone else ended up paying for someone else's, and the spirit of the race was just incredible. Just everybody was like just there to help each other out, and it was really good. Day 1 was not so chatty with people, because I think everyone just wants to kind of get into the rhythm. But you could see from the very early stages that everybody was there to try and get everybody through it, which was nice. So then you leave Penny Pass and you start on the pig track, head up towards Cribgoch. And I think, to be honest, they've absolutely nailed the way that they do Cribgoch, because it says you've got to do it as part of the race, but as you go up it, there's a number. There must have been 5 marshals on the ascent bit. Anyone who's done it will know it's kind of rock climby, kind of cliff face-ish to get up onto the ridge line itself. And you've got to pick your way up. And if you don't know it, you could get yourself into a bit of trouble. So they've got, I would say there's probably 4 or 5 marshals on that initial bit, just kind of hinting to people you should probably go that way. You should probably, which is good, I think, and probably needed for such a big event with so many people in.
Well, at that point you're tired as well, so just to give you, like you said, you buy in a light zero drink. Obviously you're not thinking. So just get those markers to get you on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to. This year you had to be at Penny Pass by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and if you weren't there by 5, that was the cutoff. I mean, I went through there at 3, so I still got plenty of time. But some guys literally left that checkpoint at 5 to 5. At which point you've been running for hours and you're just exhausted, aren't you? So they definitely were needed. Then you go up over the top, and once you get up onto the top of Snowdon, everybody knows what it's been like there this year. There's just people everywhere. So you kind of they'd sort of sectioned off an area for runners with some flagpoles and made it a little bit easier for us. But even like the spirit of people who were just up the mountain, everyone was just really kind of cheering you along and giving you loads of encouragement, which was nice. So the only thing is you do all these beautiful mountains, which I absolutely love spending time, but you don't see any of it. Even on a glorious day like we had, you're just so focused on just like I'll give you an example. 6 days I took 1 photograph. Because I was just so, I can't stop to take a photograph. It might be the difference between getting there and not. So you've just kind of got to live it in the moment if you can. At that point, when I was actually towards the end of Crib Goch, was where Steve Birkinshaw was being airlifted off the other side of the horseshoe. He'd had a bit of a heart thing happen. Thankfully, he's absolutely fine now. But that was a bit disconcerting as I'm running over the top of Crib Goch and there's an the sea rescue copter coming over the top. You're thinking, oh, good God. But it's a mountain at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then you go around the horseshoe and you've just got this horrendously brutal descent down into down to the pumping station. I would say anybody who's doing next year's race, you've absolutely got to go and do the horseshoe and just be aware of that, because that is hard and you need to be able to get an idea of the route off, because you could make horrendously bad mistakes there and you could almost end up going in the completely wrong direction, especially if you're up there at sort of 9 o'clock at night. You could end up in real trouble. So it's definitely worth getting up there and having a look at that for sure. And then you just drop down over the river and you're more or less into camp within about 3 or 4 minutes of running. Dibbed in, it was about, I made it at about 7:30 that day, so 12 and a half hours of running in the glorious heat, and that was dark, so I only made it into camp in the light, I think 1 or 2 days all week. It was always dark for me, but then it was the experience of trying to get yourself sorted and everything squared away, which kind of was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I knew that there weren't going to be any showers. I knew that you'd got base facilities realistically. So straight away, get your bags. For me, my order of doing things was I would go to my tent, literally take my trainers off, swap my trainers for my camp shoes, and then just go straight to a stream, wherever the stream is, dunk in it to some degree, wash the majority of the crap off you if you can. Depending on what how many sets of kit you're carrying was what you're going to do with the kit that you've worn that day. So for me, it was kind of try and see if I could air it out in some way to be able to wear it again the next day potentially, and just get a little bit of normality back to your body in terms of washing off in a stream. And then straight away, I would then eat my recovery food, which I'd pre-taken with me. Rather than go back, because it's like a lot of walking. So the camp, you come into camp and you've got the medical tent, then you've got the washing facilities, then you've got the kitchen and then the dining area, and then the tents are kind of like 100 meters further on, so it's not to disturb the people who want to sleep when people are still coming in tenant. So it is quite a lot of back and forth, which you don't really want to add more miles to, like you've done enough already. So I was kind of like stay as close to the tent as I could to start with, to make sure I'd got everything ready for the next day. So resetting up the drop bag for the next day, resetting up my kit, making sure that I got the right powders in the right bottles and all that kind of stuff. Pre-label stuff up before you go is my advice, and put each day into one bag. So, you know, one bag which says, you know, with a separate bag inside it that says drop bag kit, and then another bag inside it that says your rucksack kit. And it just means you haven't, because like, you know, buying the zero sugar lilt, it's your brain is just not able to compute loads of stuff. And the easier you can make it for yourself, the better. I would then, once I got my bag sorted, chuck my camping stuff into the pod in the tent, and get up and get a load of food inside me. And I would most days I was eating two meals, so just trying to get as much calories in as I could.
Yeah.
And then I personally kind of sat around for a little while chatting with people. I had a sleep drink which I drank every evening, and then brush your teeth and into bed. Don't go there expecting to get 8 hours sleep, because it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
You're in 8-man tents, and day 1 we had 8 men. Day 2 we had 7 men. Day 3 we went down to 3 of us.
Oh wow.
And then after day 3, days 4 and 5, they swapped all the tents around. So then we ended up with 7 again for the last 2 nights. Which, you know, you do understand, it's fair enough. They don't want to be putting up all those tents for half as many people. So you're sharing with 8 men, and we all get a bit stinky by the end of the week, and everyone's snoring and everyone's fine. And take some earplugs, which will definitely help. But you're not going to sleep great because you're uncomfortable and you're tired and your legs are fidgeting. But just make the most of the sleep time as you can. The one guy in our tent who was really fast, he would come in every day and he just lay in his bed for about 2 hours. He was fortunate that he'd got the time to do that because he was quicker. But once he's kind of got all his kit sorted and had some food, he would then he'd be awake, but he would just be lying down and just giving his body a couple of hours of just relaxation time. But I think it depends on how fast you are. I didn't have time to do that because I'm too busy trying to get myself sorted out for the next day. It all depends on your level, doesn't it, I suppose? And then, so I remember being woken up in the middle of the night. It was about 3:30 in the morning to the sound of someone being sick and it bouncing off a tent.
Oh,
and I'm thinking to myself, oh God, please let that not be our tent. Thankfully it wasn't. I never found out who it was, but it wasn't our tent, so it's all right. And then early starts every day, so you can leave the camp from 6 o'clock in the morning. I never left that early. They give you a slip at the end of your day, and it says the suggested time that you should leave camp the next day, based on how long it's taken you the day before. So their suggested time for me to leave was 7:30. I made the decision to just give myself an extra hour, and so I left at 6:30 every day, apart from Thursday where I left at 6. But I decided that 6:30 gives me more time in the cooler day, because it's obviously morning. And then if I'm back to camp earlier, great. I'm never going to beat the reason they do that is because the really fast runners, if they set off at 6 o'clock, there's a chance that they would get to the drop bag before the drop bags are even there. So that's why they do it. But I know that some people were given those sheets and stuck to them like glue. And then I know, unfortunately, a couple of people fell by the wayside by missing cut-offs, even though the day before they'd actually put in quite a good time. So just be mindful of that. I'm not saying completely ignore them, but just be a little bit cautious of what it says on the sheet. You know your own body is the reality, and how hard you're going to be able to push on day 2. Some people will have pushed so hard on day 1 that day 2 then became a real slog, I guess. Whereas for me, I did push hard on day 1, but the whole time the back of my mind was, you've got to do this for 6 days, don't go too hard. And I think that I think that's a huge thing as well. Add another one to the list, but just be really mindful that this is not a 1 day race. It's not a 2 day race. It's 6 days, and it does catch up with you.
Well, day one's the hilliest mountain, well, the mountainous bit of the day anyway, and it starts to go down elevation. So I think it'd be very hard to stay reserved on that first day anyway, because it is so tough on both fronts, on mentally as well as physically. So I think after, I'm sure when you talk about the second day and third day, you can sort of get into the rhythm of it, how it all works, and then you can control things a bit better. But I think day one would always go out the window for most people anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I woke up on day 2. I set my alarm for 4:30. I think I ended up waking up about 5. Dave, I was in the same pod as Dave. He woke up slightly ahead of me. He finished day 1, woke up slightly ahead of me. We got ourselves sorted, taping feet or whatever else you needed to do. I found that if I get everything done straight away in the tent, then go in my camp shoes to get food, have myself, I personally ate as much as I possibly could for breakfast, like loads of egg, loads of hash browns, as much as you could. There's no, people will be aware, but it's all vegan, so there's no meat-based stuff. But I thought the food was pretty reasonable. A lot of beans though, which is a bit disconcerting for a camp full of people. But I found
to get me out of here then.
Yeah, maybe. I found just eat as much as I possibly could for breakfast. Just keep, and even when you get to the point where you just feel like you can't eat anymore, just get a bit more in, because that just gives you like an hour or an hour and a half where you're not having to constantly think about eating once you hit the trail. I also then each day would have some Mountain Fuel breakfast stuff as well, because I find that stuff really good for my energy levels initially. Get the teeth brushed, wash stuff up, kit bags weighed back in again, and get going as soon as possible. It was kind of 6:30, 6:45 for me to get out of camp. And day 2 was a real eye opener. I hadn't done any recce of it at all, and it was hard, really hard. Like everyone talks about the Rinogs or the Rhinogs, depending on how you pronounce it, and they're brutal. But even before you get there, the whole of day 2 is just really, really difficult. I think your body is still so tired from day 1 that day 2 is a proper slog, but also incredible at the same time. But it's the same throughout the whole race. You know, it's incredibly beautiful and brutal. So it's a real balance. But it's quite flat to start with, so it kind of gives you a chance to get warm, and then you're able to get into a bit of a rhythm and kind of be sort of jogging / sliding your feet along the floor as quickly as you can. Just be really conscious of keeping an eye on your track, whether it's that you use a GPS watch or you're using a map, because there's a couple of sections I found on day 1 where it kind of naturally your brain says, oh, it must be that way, but actually it's over there somewhere. So always be conscious of your direction. Just keep checking that. Fair bit of climbing to start with, and then the day 2 checkpoint, I made my biggest mistake of the entire race. I went into it and it was absolutely baking sunshine, and I just thought I'll just give myself a bit of a rest and I'll change my shoes. And I took my shoes off, and I then ended up sitting there for 45 minutes.
Wow.
And I just couldn't get myself going again. And that's not me saying to people don't change your shoes, because it might mean you're sitting, but you just got to be really aware of making sure you just keep going. It may be that I absolutely needed to do that, and had I not done it, I might not have made it. But it was, now when I look back, I think, oh, that was a mistake. I think much like every other part of the race, get into where you need to be, get what you need to do done, and then get out. Don't sit there chit-chatting, which is what I did. But then you exited that drop bag point, and then you're up something called the Roman Steps, which takes you up onto the Rhinogs. And I was going out thinking I'm on for a reasonable time for the day overall. Everything seems to be comfortable, and there's people coming back down in the opposite direction. I'm like, where are you going? I'm done. And the amount of people that were coming back down the hill, it was just, honestly, it was just so hot. I think if the heat hadn't have been there, then many, many, many more people would have finished. But it is what it is, isn't it? But it's beautiful. That part of Wales is just incredible, and incredibly difficult terrain. Huge, great big boulders, huge, great big scree slopes, and just line choice is hugely key. So it might be worth going and doing a recce day there with somebody who knows it. I know Kate Worthington does recce days up there. I was fortunate enough that I was with somebody who had done a recce day at the time, so I hadn't recce'd any of it. One of the lads who I was with at that point just happened to be running alongside. He had done at one of Kate's recce days, and he said, "Oh, when we get here, we need to go across like this." And I thank God that I was with him, because I just would have ended up rolling down this horrible scree slope, praying for my life as I went down, because it is like seriously gnarly. It's just, you know, knowing which direction to go in. Even though your watch is telling you need to go that way, it might be that you need to go that way a bit first to get around it. Because the GPX that they put on the website is brilliant. It worked really well for me, but actually it's just kind of dots linked together. It's not actually someone that's been out there and run it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but day 2, kind of really, really mountainous. The second part, the Rhinogs, are incredibly brutal, and you are absolutely goosed as you're going over them. But try and get chatting to people. I was chatting to people as much as I could, and some people don't want to chat, at which point it's not a problem. You just carry on. Other people are quite happy talking, and it's what gets the 2 of you, the 3 of you, the 4 of you through the day or whatever. The day 2 end is pretty brutal. You come off the Rhinogs into Dolgelley, and you cross a main road, and then you go over the river, and you can see these lights in the distance, and you just think, well, those lights must be camp. Well, actually, it's just a pub. So you get like a bit closer, and it's a pub, and actually the campsite is still 1.5 miles away. So that was a bit of a gutter for me. And the end 1.5 miles, 2 miles is literally on flat road. So for me, it was okay, because I've got long legs and reasonable at trotting along on a road. But the amount of people I overtook who were just like, when does this ever end? And then the campsite on day 2 as well. It's like you go in through what are the campsite gates, but it's still like 3/4 of a mile to get to where the camp is. So it's pretty hard. But that day I got back, I can't remember what time it was, but it was dark again, and unfortunately Dave was there to greet me, so he didn't make it to the drop bag checkpoint in time that day, so he was done. But he was really gracious, came and met me and helped me with my kit and got things sorted. Loads of food down me again. Dave decided he was going to stay, have a crack at the morning of Wednesday, and then go home at the end. Much the same process in camp overnight. Better stream on day 2, more like a river really. Well, it was a river, so you were actually able to get in it properly. And then day 3 was straight into Cadair Idris. So you run back into Dolgelley, short little distance, and then you're straight up onto the mountain, and that's just beautiful. And it's a nice, even though the day 3 was still pretty hot, in the morning you're the right side of the mountain to be in the shade. So it was quite nice. And it did mean that you ended up with a lot of people all kind of together. So there was a real camaraderie growing at that point as well, a real kinship, which was nice. Took a couple of cheeky lines with Dr. Greg. I can't think what his surname is now, but that was his 5th running of the Dragon's Back, which I just think is lunacy. But he absolutely loved it, and fair play to him. What a fit guy. And he knew a couple of cheeky little lines to avoid some of the elevation, so I did my best to stick with him for the first part of the day. And you then end up, just before you get to Machynlleth, there's a horrible out and back, and I think it's the only real out and back of the entire week. And you come out of this wood, and in front of you is this like just vast green slope. You can see runners going off to the right, but then also runners going up there, and you're just like, oh my God. That was hard, that part, because you just knew I'm going up this just to come back down it.
Yeah.
And I remember actually saying to one of the girls at one point, I think I said it to either Zoe or Sophie, saying, I've just got up this mountain just to come back down again. And she just looked at me and she went, it's a mountain race. Which is a very good point. I did sign up for it. So yeah, that's hard. You just go up and the point, come straight back down it again. But you obviously then get to speak to loads of different people, like people who are quite near the front of the race to people who are further down the field. So it was nice to kind of chat and say hello to lots of different people.
Yeah.
And then you drop down into Mac, and that's the first opportunity to get into a shop. I decided I was just going to go to the garage as you go into the I don't know, it's a village or a town. It's town, isn't it? As you get into the town, there's a little garage on the right side. I decided I just fired in there, got myself some Cokes, and ice cream, and just literally enough just to get me through that day. I'd made a decision before I went that I was going to, all the food I wanted I was taking, and I'd sacrifice kit in order to be able to take the right food, because I know my body, and if it meant I ended up having to eat pasties and stuff, I'd just end up screwed. So I knew I'd got enough food. I just needed to get some energy in the form of some Coke and stuff. So bought those. And then I got to the drop bag point in Mahuncliffe, and my mum was there with my stepdad and my auntie and my uncle and my eldest son. And they thought I looked like a Walking Dead on day one. Well, day 3, I was an absolute mess. And I don't think I even said hello to them. I just walked straight into the drop bag point, just like an absolute mess. But everyone had said that had done the previous races that if you got to the halfway point of day 3, you're probably going to finish the race. Now, obviously, this year was different because there was the extra day. So I wasn't counting my chickens at that point, not by any stretch of imagination, but just the sheer fact that I'd got there, kind of gave me a bit of a boost of, well, I've got this far, there's nothing to say I can't carry on, get to the end. And one of the helpers in that checkpoint was walking around with like the garden sprayers that you use to spray the weeds, just like covering people in water, which was just incredible. He just literally like sat there like that, just soaking it all in, trying to get in the shade as much as you could, and it was an experience. But then after I'd eaten something in there, got myself together, sorted my bits and pieces out, I then was able to say hello to the family, had a bit of a hug with the youngster, and then got moving again. And I remember the end of day 3 being really nice, really enjoying it, and you see some incredible reservoirs and some beautiful hills, and it was really good. But the last descent I found hard. I think I just got my nutrition wrong towards the end of the day. I think I did that a few times. So the last descent into the camp was hard, but got that. You could see the camp really early on. So I was running down, and it was still daylight-ish. It was dusk. But as I got to the road, you literally just cross the road, and then the entrance to the camp is on the left. Dave was leaving camp with his wife and the kids, so they stopped, and we kind of parted ways, and I said thanks to him for helping me the day before and all that sort of stuff. And he signed back up for this year. I knew he would. Unfinished business. So then into camp, same routine again. But I think that was the day that they took our trackers off us to charge them, to make sure everything's in order, and also swap the dibbers over for some fresh dibbers, just because everything starts to get a bit tatty. And then it was the start of day 4. And I loved day 4, absolutely loved it. It was by far my favourite day. It's long, but it's much, much more runnable, and much more, not quite the same, but much more like running in Church Stretton. yeah, it's mountainous, but not big mountains. So I was able to run a lot more, and I cooked myself because I ran too much. But I did really love it. I just, the massive sheep tracks that you could just make some really good progress on, which I found really good fun. I hooked up with a girl called Zoe Murphy that day. We just kind of stumbled into each other on the trails and ended up running for most of that day together. She was just incredible, real, really beneficial for me because we were quite like-minded. So chit chatting whilst running, it just really worked. So we ran most of that day together, apart from towards the end where I kind of just felt comfortable striding out, and she'd kind of had enough of running fast, so she dropped back a bit. But you finished that day on a 10-kilometer stretch of road, and I can't even I think back and I can't remember, but I picked off so many people along that road section because I just was in a rhythm and just was flying along. So just like made up loads of time, and it was the first time I got into camp that day where I got loads of daylight left, and it was ace to get into camp with daylight left. It made your body feel like in a completely different place. But unfortunately, like I said, I kind of cooked myself. I went a little bit too hard, and trashed my feet a little bit because I'd obviously pushed along quite hard on the road, ended up with a few more blisters than I should have had. So I had to manage those then from the end of day 4. So day 5 and 6, I was running on blisters, which is a bit of a shame really because I'd done so well. But at that point, you've got wet feet. So even if you've taken 3 pairs of shoes, the shoes that were dry, you've changed into, they're now wet. The other ones never get a chance to dry unless you're a front runner because you're always getting in at night. So there's never any temp. Yeah. Well, they go inside a dry bag, and of course, the dry bag stops the air. So I guess that's really why I got blisters, but I don't think it helped that I was pushing so hard. But I really enjoyed it, so I wouldn't change it. No. It was good fun, and that's what I went for, to go and enjoy it. And it is the most incredible part of Wales I've ever seen. I've never been there before, and I will definitely be going back. It's just incredibly beautiful, the Elan Valley. Just something I'd never experienced before. And then day 5 is an absolute beast. Days 1 and 2 are hard, and they're going to be hard, but you're still pretty fresh. Day 5 is just a relentless slog of horrendous, like, unmarked trails, unwalked trails. So you're just constantly, even if you're on what's supposed to be a path, you're having to lift your legs like over a foot above the ground to be able to take the next step. And it's like that realistically all the way to Pen y Fan, and then it becomes a motorway. So I did find day 5 really hard. That for me was the hardest day. Again, I ran with Zoe for quite a lot of that day. We kind of just met up and got into a rhythm together where you're able to kind of keep pushing each other a little bit. There is a village early on, I can't remember what the village is called now, where some people stopped at the bakery and got some food and stuff. But like I said earlier, my food is kind of key, so I didn't stop, just kept pushing through. So there is some road, and there are some marked trails which are runnable, but there's a lot of that kind of over like babies' heads and all that kind of stuff, which is just so brutal on your ankles, and your quads are just absolutely trashed by that point. And you go to the checkpoint for that day is at the Usk Reservoir. So you're running along the road, which is alongside the reservoir, and then you get to the bridge, and you can see the other side of the bridge is where the checkpoint is. But there's some renovation work being done, which means that you can't cross the bridge. So you have to go down the road, down a massive hill to cross another bridge to come back up a massive hill. And actually, it's not, I say massive, it's tiny in comparison to what you have been doing. but in your brain you're like, but it's just there, I just need to get to there. So that was hard. I think that just added to it. But we did that, and then you leave that checkpoint and there was quite a long section of road then, and we were jogging along. We felt we were going reasonably well, and then the winners, Simon Roberts and Russell Bentley, then came up behind us, and we could hear them coming. And it was like they were out for a 10K, just like chatting away to each other on a 40-minute 10K. It was ridiculous. But they went through and passed, and then it was amazing to see the different kind of abilities out there.
Yeah.
Because those guys, they're just absolutely incredible in terms of what they're able to achieve. And Katie Mills, who won the women's race, she was just in a class of her own. She really was, and such a nice girl with it as well. Really, really pleasant person. But just as I say, the different people that you come across during the race. I met people who were, one guy who was a pilot, a couple of doctors. I'm sure you'll have heard the story about the guy who dislocated his shoulder. Yeah, so that was day 4, and just happened that there was a shoulder surgeon 2 people behind him. What are the chances of that?
Yeah.
It was incredible, and just the different, as I say, the different kinds of people as you went through it was amazing. But day 5, I remember one point I was absolutely spent. Just before you got to the Story Arms, you come over the top of, I think it's Fanny Big, and we crested the top of the mountain, and like down the other side, it's just literally just this steep grassy descent. And I remember standing at the top. I was with Zoe and a girl called Sophie Littlefair, and I was just like, there is no way I'm going down there. I'm done. I'm finished. And they were like, what are you on about? I was like, I'm done. I'm not moving any further. So I sat down, and I thought, well, if I sit down, maybe I can slide down. And I literally, it was like I was on a sledge. Just went down this hill on my backside all the way. And thankfully, there were no stones or rocks to catch me out. And then we stopped at the burger van at the Story Arms, got a load of scoff, and the poor woman behind the burger van had got no idea what was going on. There was all these people just like stealing all her food, not stealing obviously, but taking but taking her entire week's stock in one day. And then we got up onto the last of the big hills, Penny Fan, and we kind of separated then. Zoe was on fire, so she went off really fast. Sophie and I stayed together for a while, and then we met up with a lad, another localish lad from Stourbridge, Phil. Can't think what his surname is now, but he'd been going really well. He was in the top 5, and unfortunately, he kind of completely bonked on day 5 and destroyed himself. So we ended up sticking together for a little while. But again, I kind of think I've got my nutrition wrong a bit. So that's towards the end of day 5. I thought that having ate a load of food from the roadside calf would give me the energy to get up Penny Pass, so I kind of missed a bit of my routine out. Actually, the reality was that I still needed to do what I had been doing. So once I'd got up over Penny Fan, I just kind of hit a wall, really. So the last 4 miles of day 5 took absolutely ages for me, and it was really demoralising. I'd done that. I had recce'd that last section in October last year, and in my head I remembered it being really fast and really easy, but it's just not. It just seems to go on and on and on. And the final descent, you end up like coming alongside a stream, and my feet were just screaming at me every single step, and it was hard. But you then end up on a bit of a road, and you do probably about 500 meters along the road before you get to the camp. And I got into camp. That was my latest, getting into camp, the latest, despite having left the earliest. It is like a really brutal day, day 5. So anyone who's going to do it this year, be prepared for pain on that day. And then I went into the medical tent because I was in so much pain. They kind of helped me out a little bit with my my feet. I knew I'd got blisters and I knew what I needed to do to them, but I couldn't get to them because my legs were so painful that every time I bent my legs into a position where I could reach what I needed to reach, they'd cramp up, and it was just so. Yeah, I got a bit of help off the medical team that day. And that was when I started having a bit of pain down the front of my left shin, and I think it's just you 5 days into
it's going to happen.
Miles, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
So the physio who's on site there the whole week very kindly kind of strapped me up a bit, which definitely helped, I think. I went through my same routine that evening, made sure I got everything sorted, squared away, ready for the morning. Set my alarm for the same time on the last morning. It went off. I turned it off. It then went off again. 20 minutes later, I turned it off again, and ridiculously, I just couldn't get going. So I think it was 5:30 before I actually got out of my pit. Then I had to sort my feet out, get some breakfast, get all my kit packed. So I'd left at either 6:30 or 6 all week. That day I didn't leave till 7:30. I was just in so much pain, and I remember leaving the camp and I couldn't even run along this flat road. I was just completely broken, and just thinking, I'm not. How am I going to get to the end? I just was in so much pain. And you run, you kind of have this road section for a short time, and then you take a right into a field, and then you're straight up onto it's really the only big mountain. Well, it's not even a big mountain. It's a bit of a lump.
Yeah.
It's a big hill, but classed as a mountain, I guess. And I remember looking at it thinking, oh my God, how on earth am I going to get up there? And then you kind of get onto a bridleway, which ramps up. And it's a bit like running on the sniper stones, where you've just got those like stones the size of your fist everywhere.
Upwards and so on, yeah.
Yeah. And when your feet are already sore, it was just like every step was agony. And I got tears like rolling down my face from pain mixed with emotion in reality. And I got towards the top of there, and I hadn't run a step from the minute I left camp to the point getting to the top of that hill. I hadn't run a step. It was all walk / shuffle a little bit. And I rang my wife, who had gone down to the castle, and I said, I'm on my way, but I honestly have no idea how long this is going to take me. I was just like in so much pain, and I think I was just drained completely, physically and emotionally spent. And I was on the phone to her, just bawling my eyes out. And a couple of guys came past me at the time, and everyone says, "Are you okay?" And you're like, "Well, I no, but I am, because what else am I going to say? Because I'm not going to say, you can't do anything about that. Nobody can do anything about it, can they?" So, and yeah, and then they're really, really hot on painkillers and what you can and can't take during the race, which I totally get. So, but I have to say, by the end of that, by day 6, I just got to the point where I was just like, I'm going to take some painkillers, and this is what's going to help me get through the day. So I took some painkillers probably about halfway up that first hill. And then I got to the top, and as you go over the top, it's just this like really long, shallow, grassy descent. And I just remember saying to myself, well, if I can't run here, then I'm not going to be able to run any of it, and I'm going to have to walk the whole thing. So I thought, I've got to try. So I started a bit of a shuffle, and it was no more painful than it was to walk. So I went a bit faster, and it was still no more painful. So I went a bit faster, and still the same. So I thought, well, if it's the same pain to run as it is to walk, I might as well run. Yeah. And then it was like, I don't know, it was almost like a switch flicked, and I just was able to I more or less ran, I would say, from that point onwards, I ran 90% of the day then. There were a couple of hills that I just couldn't run up, but the rest of it, I was just properly in running mode, and just ran the whole thing. And it was just, in the end, it became an incredible experience, and really enjoyed it. And because I was running and so many people were walking / shuffling, I passed so many people, but it was all, every single one was a nice experience. It was a bit of a chat with them, they had a bit of a chat with me, and you moved on. I mean, some people literally, I think, took that day as like a walking pub crawl, because there were loads of opportunities to stop and have a drink, or whether it was a shop or a pub or whatever. So I think a lot of guys kind of took it as a celebration day, whereas for me, I just wanted to get to the end. I absolutely needed to see my family. I've got to get there. So I remember I stopped at a co-op in Merthyr Tydfil, got some food, had a fruit smoothie and some other bits and pieces, and then yeah, just carried on running and running and running. And I remember getting to the top of one of the final hills and being able to see the sea in the distance, and just rang my wife and I was like, I can see the sea. I'm not that far away. I was still a good way away, but you know, she was like, well, you don't sound anything like you did earlier. And I was like, I know, it's just, I just felt, I don't know, like euphoria had taken over, and it was just, it was a really incredible experience. Until about a mile and a half from the finish, where I hit the wall completely and utterly hit the wall. And I was just like, ah, crap, how am I going to get to the end? Because it was just like, I just ground to a halt. But thankfully, I'd got a can of Coke in my bag and it was full fat. So I cracked the can of Coke and then, yeah, just managed to like run, walk, and then I got to, I think I was probably about half a mile from the end, and you're running through all these parks in Cardiff, and Cardiff's amazing. I've never been and spent time there before, but I'm definitely going to go back. It's a beautiful city, and you kind of running along the river, and there's just people everywhere enjoying, because it was another sunny day. You know, the families are enjoying it. There was this row of benches, and I looked at this family who were looking at me, and I said, "Is there a castle around here?" Knowing that obviously there's a castle around here, but just needed them to say, "Yeah, literally just round the corner." And that's exactly what they said to me, and it just spurred me to just get, you know, finish that last leg off. And I ran into the castle, just like completely, just amazing feeling of just fulfillment of I've made it to the end and crossed the line. And Matt Ward, who was doing the commentary, kind of was talking about how we'd all been through this massive journey and all the rest of it. And then I just spotted my wife and my son on the railings, and just just fell into pieces in their arms, and it was such an amazing experience.
I mean,
It really was.
It's not an easy challenge. It knocks you to pieces all the way through, and I think that sometimes when you finish something as great as that, and you've been in pain and been torturing yourself for so long, I think all the emotions do sometimes come out like that. I've been in races like that myself. So, and my character of it isn't to be emotional as such at the end of it, but sometimes you can't help hold that in, can you?
No, definitely not. It just was literally just like poured out of me, and then you kind of have that, because my wife and my youngest son were there. My eldest wasn't able to come. And then my mum was there, my stepdad was there, my auntie, my uncle, my cousins, my other auntie. You know, all these people had come to see me, which I wasn't expecting, and it was just like so overwhelming. And then you kind of have that final go into the runners area to sort all your kit out, and then like literally my legs just went, no more, sit down, you're done. And I honestly, we stayed at a Premier Inn, which was probably about, in realistic terms, a 5-minute walk from the castle.
Yeah.
But it took me 45 minutes.
And you're on the top floor, yeah?
Yep. Thank God for lifts. We went back to the Premier Inn. I had a bath, which was just amazing. Managed to get all the sticky stuff off my legs and plasters and whatnot, and then turned to my wife and I was like, what am I going to put on my feet? Because none of my shoes would go on my feet. So she went to the local Primark and bought some like loafer things, which was 2 sizes too big. And then I had another 45-minute walk back to the castle to have the presentation. So,
and how was the presentation? Because I know the trophy is pretty is a pretty good trophy, isn't it?
Should have brought the trophy up with me, shouldn't I? Stupid boy. It's just the experience of being amongst that group of people who finished and can hold on to that dragon. It was pretty incredible. And they did it where that if somebody finished while the presentation was going on, they would like skip the queue, if you like, and go straight in to have their trophy given to them there and then. So that was quite a nice experience for everyone, especially for them, I'm sure. I know one of the lads from South Wales, Dean, he finished while we were having the presentation, and he was just incredible. Postman from South Wales, who'd never run an ultra before, let alone a multi-day, and he finished, and you're just like absolutely incredible, and such a nice guy. I owe him for some blackberries, actually. We were running down into Mount Cliff, and I'm running along thinking, oh my god, I just need something, and he's like blackberries, and it's incredible what you end up scavenging just to get you through. But yeah, that was just amazing to be part of that group of people that finished. There were 90 of us that finished in the end. 425 people entered, but I think 367 started actually on day one.
It's amazing, isn't it? So it's a massive drop out there, but it's understandable. I mean, do you? I mean, a lot of people I speak to when they're thinking, okay, I want to do the Dragon's Back, but I'm not superhuman. I'm not fit enough to be able to get across it. Do you think that's the case, or do you think if you've got the preparation right, you get your training right, you don't need to be super quick, you can do something like this?
Yeah, definitely. You don't have to be superhuman. I am not superhuman, not by a long stretch. I think that you have to have a very strong mental attitude. That is massively key. I think you could be the fittest person in the world and not finish Dragon's Back because you get to a point where you don't want to go anymore, so you stop. But you have to be that person that you get to the point where you don't want to go anymore, but you keep going. That's half of it. But yeah, if you put the preparation in, get your nutrition right, and look after yourself, anyone can finish it if they can move. You don't have to be a fast runner. I think it helps, but you don't have to be a fast runner. You could probably do that. You couldn't walk it because you wouldn't make the times, but as long as you can shuffle reasonably quickly on the flats and the downhills, you could definitely make it. But it is, I think, as much about mental attitude as it is about fitness. I think personally, what helps me is the fact that I spent 12 months in a wheelchair, and the pain that I went through there, whatever I go through in life now, I kind of put it back to that. Or is it that bad? No, it's not. And I'm still able to do what I'm able to do now. And that I think that helps me. And I think what you've been through in life perhaps does kind of set you up for stuff. But I think if you're going to sign up for it, be prepared to be in pain.
Yeah.
Reality.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, Tim, mate, I could talk to you about the Dragon's Back all day, mate. There's loads of questions out there, and when this goes live on the YouTube channel, if anyone out there wants to put any comments below, I'm sure I'll tag you in it, so I'm sure you'll have some answers for them. I'm sure if anyone's just on the Dragon's Back, they can sort of jump into the chat as well. But thank you so much for talking to us, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
And what's on the plans for next? Because I know you put on your social media that you would never do anything extreme as this again. Or you book something else?
Yeah, I'm not sure is the truth. I've never done. This sounds absolutely crazy, but I've never done a proper marathon. So I quite fancy a crack at a marathon to see what kind of time I could do. And then I'd like to have a go at Paddy Buckley.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not all over for you yet,
then? No, definitely not. I think the multi-day stuff, that's me done. Because what do you do to beat that now in terms of multi-day stuff? I just don't think, it's called the world's toughest mountain race, and I think it's probably well up there. Without going across the world to do something, which I can't do because I'm just a normal guy, I think that it'll be stuff that I can do in a day or a couple of days now moving forward. And obviously the Longmont hike again, try and get under those 10 hours.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Thank you so much, pal.
Thanks, Alex. Really enjoyed it.